calling us from the US or from
No,
you're in
it's very late here. I
yeah,
thought
I had a
I
horrible
would stop
feeling that it
by.
was incredibly early where you are. You're in, is it Taipei?
hmm We don't
So
have class tomorrow, so I figured I could stay up late.
wow. So
Is
Aldo
it
Good
Cortella,
teacher's
if you're
day.
listening along, Edward Nolan is joining us from Taipei, and it is very early in the morning where
is
he
it two
is.
two in the morning? What is it?
That's right. It's about to.
Okay.
So you're in demand, Professor Coachella.
So thanks.
The pressure is on now.
Yeah, both sides of the date line, because I'm in California and he's across in Taipei.
I don't know. We
That's
may
right.
always. I don't know whether Nikki will join us from Auckland. That's always the furthest, isn't it? From where I
Yeah.
am, anyway. Not so far from you, Edward. But
No, well, far but not far in time zone, which is nice.
yeah, I mean similar, isn't it? No, hang on. She's getting up in the morning, isn't she? Isn't she usually getting up?
Isn't it normally about 6 in the morning, something like that?
She gets up at 6 or 7 in the morning. Yeah, 6, I think, and then goes to work afterwards.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
strange thing.
Aldo,
Something's
where are you calling from? I was interested to know where Aldo is based. Where are you? Are you in Rome?
No, well. So I live in Basilicata, which is a region in southern Italy.
Mhm.
But I live in the countryside where my connection is not so strong. That's why I came to Salerno, which is in Campania, where I have a better link to. So now I am in Salerno.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Normal seat is Basilicata, between Potenza and Matera, which are the two chief towns of the small region.
Yes.
It's a strange region within southern Italy, but it's made of mountains, so it's very cold. It's always snows, so very far from the standard image of southern Italy.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Actually, I suddenly realized, Tom, did we ask Aldo's permission to record this talk? I guess I should ask now. Aldo, are you happy for us
I
to?
have no problem if you want to record.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm only afraid that the stupid things I'm going to say will be recorded.
No.
I happen to know that's not true because I've read in advance the content.
I suppose theoretically the oral version could go crazy, but it seems unlikely.
It does seem unlikely. So we know for a fact that's not true.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. So no problem if you want to record.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you. Are you okay doing that side? Yeah, I'm sorry. We should check the practicality, shouldn't we? You're okay doing the recording?
I think so. I haven't done it for a few months, but I hope it's as I remember.
It worked the same way as before. I mean, I could probably manage it, but I think your internet connection is better than mine, so it's a bit safer.
Well, anyway, I'll give it a go. It should be fine. This is number 100, so hopefully
not everyone recorded, so it should be.
Yeah,
it should be okay. All right, and I'll do the chat.
Yeah.
And Aldo, do we need to? Would it be a good idea to if you have do you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I have, and we already checked
it
out. It apparently works.
That's
you've done that.
You're way behind the times.
We've done that after half an hour.
Positively minutes
ago. You were here early, were you, basically? I'm shocked. Okay, all right.
Okay,
I'm glad.
Sorry.
No, it's
just too efficient.
Put in my place.
Hello, Justy. Good to see you again.
Are you in Lincoln?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we are. Well, technically, second week. We did welcome week last week with the freshers, and then we are in the first week of teaching. So yes, I am in Lincoln.
Everything's all right. It's all going well.
Yeah, everything is fine after a summer of traveling around, but it was fine. Frankly, I prefer here than in Bari, where was still warm, hot, I would say, up to 2 days ago. So much better here in the UK.
We're supposed to have a storm, aren't we? We're supposed to have a huge storm here, but it hasn't appeared. My wife came back telling me that in the university here, I'm in Cambridge, they were saying that they should all close their windows because the storm was going to be so great, all the buildings would be damaged, and there's absolutely nothing. There's not a single bit of wind outside. I don't know what's happening.
There is a little bit of wind here, but not that much actually.
Much the same here,
I think
actually.
it's a.
Pretty mild.
It could be that you made a mistake. There was a time when she said it was going to be incredibly cold, and it turned out she looked up Cambridge, Massachusetts on the phone rather than Cambridge, Cambridge. So it's possible the same thing has happened. And that the storm is somewhere else in the world. But I think this was the. Franco, did you get a message telling you that there's going to be a great storm? Since you're in the same place?
No, not yet. Oh, I can see that it's getting dark outside, but no. Do you expect a great storm?
Well, Catherine got told there was going to be one by work, by the same work as you.
Right.
So
Okay.
I assume this must be for real, but we'll find out. Nazim, hello.
Hello, good to see you.
Very nice to meet you. Looking forward to your paper later in the
I
session.
heard you are talking about storms. Regarding the Ilias.
I can't. It might be
Thank
my
you.
connection, but I can't hear you. I can't hear you very well. It's broken up a bit.
Yes, it was a bit broken up.
Try again, Nazim.
I was just saying, in Athens we are experiencing. We are gonna start having the Ilias storm. They are naming them after biblical person.
That makes them sound even more frightening, doesn't it? Somehow.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Storm Elias.
Well, it
I mean,
depends. It depends. Would you want it to be random or providential? It depends.
I think it just generally gives them a sense of. I mean, apparently having them named makes people respond much better, doesn't it? That's the reason why in Britain we started naming them, because a kind of personified storm is more is taken more seriously than just bad weather tonight. So if you name them after biblical figures, surely one associates kind of, serious vengeance and cedar trees being uprooted and things like that.
Obviously, these people have stopped reading the Bible too soon. They never got to Ezekiel.
Okay, that's thank you, Franco. That's probably me too. Those are only the bits I know, the ones that have been turned into music, mostly, which is slightly shameful.
Well,
yes, that's
Laura
right.
has just joined us. No?
Oh, Laura, hello.
hello.
We were just talking about you.
Oh,
It might
were
be
you?
that
That's
very-
really
Yeah.
strange.
I
It was-
remember
she was-
you were mountainside.
Oh my God, yeah, the last time I was here, I was on a mountain.
That was just invoked. But Charles, she wasn't in the Arctic, although she might have been there by now. Have you been up Everest yet? You haven't, have you?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
A big one in Nepal next year, but not ever.
In Nevis, she was up. She was up Ben Nevis, I think, wasn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, not quite the same as Mount Everest, but close enough.
It was quite kind of dramatic though, because you could kind of see your lamp swinging and things in the background. So it wasn't comfortable watching somehow.
Sorry.
Just like when someone asked a question when it was fine. It was dramatic and worthwhile. It was like the time when who was it who called from Finland, Jan, and they were driving a car while they asked a question. Juha, that's right. It was Juha. It's either Juha or Antti. It was Juha.
Definitely.
Yeah, that was kind of slightly unnerving.
Yes.
It was a perfectly articulate question, but all the time they were kind of signalling and turning left. Doing other moves.
I do love the timing of that, Charles. So well done. Remarkable that just as you asked, Laura should appear. of all the people that could have turned up at that exact moment.
I think that was the last session I came to as well, which seemed
Excellent.
really, really strange.
I approve of that timing. So more of this kind of serendipity, please. Hello, Elizabeth. It's really lovely to see you again after the summer break, and of course everybody. Not excluding anyone, but it's I can see you on camera, so good to see you. Hello, Polly. Hi, Don. And there are a few others that are joining us as well. Hello. We've been chatting about where we are in the world. We're all in awe, and is awe the right word? Probably. That I don't mean to embarrass you, Edward, but you're calling from Taipei, and it's absurdly early in the morning. So I think awe probably is the right word, unless anyone has anything better than that. Horror might better convey my sense of being awake at this late hour for an academic talk. Late hour or early morning, which do you prefer, Edward?
I perceive it as very late, yes.
Yeah.
What time
I guess
is it?
technically it's 2 o'clock.
Oh,
Yeah.
now that's devotion.
Well, we have Teachers' Day today, so I don't have my normal class. I have in the morning because if I had to teach at 9 in the morning, I don't think I could do it. But
Yeah,
it's Confucius's birthday. We have often, actually not everywhere in Taiwan, but at NTU,
yeah.
we don't have to teach on this day.
How long have you been in Taipei?
This is my second year.
I was there for 2 weeks many years ago now, giving some guest lectures, and I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful city.
It's very nice. I like living here a lot.
Yeah, I can see that you would. I was really enchanted by it. Completely unlike anywhere I had ever been before, of course, because my travels had always been limited to Europe pretty much. But yeah, I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, I've enjoyed my job here so far. Has been
Good.
Pleasant. So, but yes, it's sometimes difficult to do. It's great that there are more online talks to attend, but yeah, it can be difficult with the time zones. That's why I'm trying to attend more things in Australia, because I'm actually going to a conference in Australia in February, but it's like an 18-hour plane ride, but it's because it's mostly north south. The time zone difference is so bad.
Yes.
Oh,
It would be flying to Santiago, Chile or something. Yes,
Right, yeah.
exactly. Same time zone, but a long way away. Yes.
Yeah.
I had completely underestimated the distance. I didn't realize it would be such a long flight from near mainland China to Australia. Wow.
Well, I'm going to Melbourne too, so I'm flying all the way across Australia.
Yeah. Okay.
But I guess the part of Australia that would be convenient to get to isn't as populated, right? So
yes. So there are lots of people joining. We still have a few minutes to go, so we can remain chatting informally. Hi, Deborah. Hello, Sue. Hello, Egidia. It's good to see you. Congratulations on your book. It came out quite recently. We should promote these things when they happen. So many congratulations. Perhaps you might even be tempted to put a link in the chat. People might want to see more about it.
Perhaps we should do this for you rather than asking.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, if one of us can beat Egidia to it,
we'll both try and get to the link faster than you.
And hello to you, her as well. We were just chatting about you. We were talking about sort of serendipitous moments, and Tom recalled the time you were driving along whilst asking a question. Perhaps you remember that.
Yeah, I was probably coming from Estonia. I remember that too, because we were moving with the cats and it was quite a hassle to drive the car. But yeah, it was important at the moment.
So I think we could make this kind of series about kind of the ways in which we're all dedicated to the helpline. And I think you and Laura will feature highly in the ways that you joined in or made a contribution. But I'm happy to hear of I think Edward has to be on that list as well, calling in at 2 p.m. 2 a.m. not 2 p.m. Big difference. But quite something. Thank you, Tom. So that's the link to Egilia's new book. Thank you. Hello, Rosaria.
Okay, yeah. Thank you too.
Thank you. So yeah, lots of you still joining. Tom, I'm suddenly conscious that it's very dark in here. I'm going to turn on the light.
Yeah, no problem. I'll fill the social gap while Jan does this essential duty. I think what you were saying, Jan, about people watching seminars in odd places and things is just what we've become used to, isn't it? It's just the new reality of online life. There was the story, I'm sure we discussed it before, of the lecturer who was giving his lectures in the bathtub, and the students said afterwards that they did wonder what the noises were. They wonder what this kind of sploshing noises were. I won't ask people to disclose the most inappropriate places they've done their online teaching from, because that might get us into trouble. But I suspect there's a lot of it, one way or another.
I mean, I thought maybe, in the garden, whilst enjoying the last rays of summer sunshine, but in the bathtub is a bit eccentric. Probably better than doing it whilst having a shower. So there's a kind of positive spin on that.
I assume he had the camera off.
He had the camera off. I think he was using a PowerPoint and had the camera off. Yeah.
Otherwise, the mind rather boggles.
I do remember there was a man in Spain, wasn't there? They got into the newspapers early on in COVID who was at a meeting and wanted to rush and pick up his children and decided he would have a shower quickly and hadn't realised he'd left the camera on. And I think he lost his job for that. So worse things can happen. At least the lecturer was careful, but I wouldn't trust the technology personally.
No,
not for a second. And you've muted yourself.
Yeah, I was just typing, and I don't know how others feel, but there's something a little bit annoying about the clickety click, isn't there? Is that just me? One former colleague, if I was in the same room, all I could hear was click, 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 click. So I'm a bit conscious of it. That was the only reason.
I think that's why there are silent areas in libraries. In the Bodleian, for instance, there are places where you may not use a laptop, because I think there are people who find the click, 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 click unbearably distracting. Those who want to still take notes by hand and read in silence.
There's probably other people that really like it as well. I think,
I find it rather soothing when I'm working in a library and all around me there's this click, 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 click. There's a hive of busy activity.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have keyboards that are like they're more old school. They have more of a to make more of a clickety clackety noise as opposed to the new ones that are quieter. So there are people who actively seek out the clickety clack, but perhaps that's not nice to their neighbors.
Like all these things, you need lots of it, and if you have lots of people clickety clacking, it's better.
Yeah,
I think. I don't know if that was an intentional sound or wasn't an intentional sound. Libraries have changed a lot. I remember when I was a student when you couldn't wear headphones at all. In fact, someone, I won't name the Herodotean, who has spoken at this seminar, who I remember being marched out of the library in Oxford, this was, and they simply said, "Are you American?" I thought so, because she was wearing headphones, which was incredibly rude. But it was a sign of the times.
I am an American who has never owned a pair of headphones, so
this was about 1988. I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I think
all the time.
See, life has moved on. But I think we've come to the hour, haven't we, Jan?
We have, yeah. So hi, everybody. And Tom, I think you wanted to start for a moment, didn't you?
I don't want to say very much, but I just want to kind of mark the occasion a little bit, partly to say welcome to the new session. So we've got a number of things here, some great papers, but we've also got in the kind of traditional format, but we're going back to the Herodotus Museum and having a couple of sessions around particular objects or sites related to the histories. And we're taking up Rosario's idea of the lexicon and trying out a couple of sessions where we just look around a set of, in the first case, a set of related terms, and then just one in the next session. So we can try out those things as a kind of model for what we could do. So welcome to this group. We've got also an amazing lineup beginning to take shape for the spring. So I shouldn't say spring, in case anyone's in the Southern Hemisphere, for January to March. So welcome to that. This is the 100th session, which is extraordinary. I should be open and say that my counting includes absolutely everything. It includes, for example, it includes the marathon. It includes the time when the speaker didn't turn up for an hour because they got confused with the time difference, I think. And there was an awful lot of scrambling around and people leaving and coming back. All sorts of amateurish moments are disguised in that figure of 100 as if it was a kind of very kind of clean, clear process. It also includes, on a completely different end of the scale, the effectively the online wake we had when Doris Post died 2 years ago. So all of those things are included in the figure of 100, which means we can maybe celebrate again in a few sessions' time. But it is the 100th time we've met, so that seems worth marking. So thank you all for coming back, and thank you for being part of this this process. And it's a particular honour to introduce Aldo as our speaker this time. It hasn't been before, but he's obviously well known to everybody here for his work on Herodotus, not least his contribution to the Valor commentaries, which many, if not all of you, will know. So I'm going to hand back to Jan for the proper business, but welcome to Aldo and welcome back to everyone else. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. That was really splendid. And absolutely just to echo what Tom has said, I'm so pleased to see people joining for what is our 100th session. I'm not sure the marathon really, does it deserve only one? I think it gets at least two. The amount of time it took up of all of our lives, but not least yours, Tom. Anyway, on to the formal proceedings. It's a real pleasure that we're here on our 100th session from Aldo Corcella, who all of us will know very well for his tremendous contribution to Herodotean scholarship. And Aldo is going to talk to us this evening on Herodotus's texts and editions. Just before I hand over to Aldo, sorry to be boring, but just a reminder, please try to mute yourselves during the talk itself. There'll be lots of time afterwards to chat. And I'm about to hand over to Aldo, and there will be this announcement for the start of the recording. So thank you, everybody, and over to you, Aldo.
Recording in progress.
Yes, I accepted. There we go. That's fine. So I thank you very, very much for your kind invitation. I'm honored and proud to give my talk for the centennial session of the Herodotus helpline. A name I always found a little enigmatic, but well found and clever. After all, as we shall see, Herodotus' work was and still is a helpline, a form of distance communication for a worldwide community. And thus, in a sense, we are still playing his game. Before starting, I must apologize, first of all, for my English, which is rather poor, as you can hear. Secondly, I must confess that Herodotus was once a true love of mine, but in the last years I've been a little unfaithful and have been concerned with other authors and other periods. However, first love never ends, and even though I may be not perfectly up to date on the latest news about European studies, I hope that what I'm about to say will not be too old-fashioned and trivial or obvious. In any case, I will try to talk to non-philologists, and specialists will excuse me if I'll say some trivialities, something that is well known. Well, Herodotus' text. We do not exactly know how Herodotus published this work. It is possible, maybe probable, maybe likely that, as some ancient sources suggest, he gave public lectures of his work, maybe of the whole work. This is a much debated question, which deserves a new and fresh analysis. In any case, the histories, as we read it today, descend from a text that was written down by the author or written down for the author. One of the proofs, an element of evidence, is the use of the verb graphein, grapho. I'm writing, I write, in the text itself. And then we can see that this text was conceived for an audience that we can call a worldwide community, an audience virtually unlimited in space. Just like Icatius or Thucydides, Herodotus says at the beginning, Herodotus of Halicarnassus or of Turi. This means that he defines himself according to his city, and this means a Pan-Hellenic public. And then we find in the fourth book, for instance, references to an Eastern audience and a Western one. So Herodotus wrote a text that had to circulate all over the world, the Greek world at least, the Mediterranean world. But he also wrote a text that was intended for an audience virtually unlimited in time. In some passages, Herodotus historicizes himself, as Wolfgang Rösler said. The most famous example is at the beginning of the work, when he says, towns which were great in my own time. They were great in my own time. So his present is a past for the listener or the reader. It's a sort of epistolary tense, which is in fact spread also in ethnographic text. It means that the author puts his experience and his own life in the past in reference to an audience, which can be also even in a remote future, an audience which can comprehend us. So we know that Herodotus wanted to leave a written text for a general audience. It may be that he dictated this text to one or more secretaries. We have no proof of this, of course. It was a practice which was relatively spread in ancient times. Can you hear me? I cannot find.
Recording stopped.
Just to
Yes,
jump
yes.
in,
So,
Aldo,
hear me, so that there was some problem. I don't know. I'm trying to come back. Here I am. So,
okay. I'll start the recording again now. Okay.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
That's fine. So, I was saying we have no proof, no evidence as for the possibility that he dictated his text. Maybe this could explain some corrections in stride, as Richmond Lattimore once called them. I mean the fact that Herodotus sometimes adds or correct a previous statement in the course of his speech, in the course of his work. Now I would like to share my PowerPoint. Here it is. Yes, I think you can see it. Well, for instance, there is a famous chapter at the end of book 7, where I ought to say, I shall now return to a point in my account where something was omitted before. This way of adding something finds parallel parallels in other texts we certainly know were dictated. I reported here a passage taken from Le Dévissement du Monde de Marco Polo, Il Milione, as it is often called. A work that we know Marco Polo dictated to Rustichello da Pisa when he was in prison. And we find a similar case. At a certain point, Marco Polo says, "Or sachez que nous avons démantiqué une belle bataille," etc. That is, while dictating, he remembers that he has forgotten something, and he says when he can and when it finds useful to do that. So it is possible that Herodotus dictated his text. But on the other side, Herodotus' text contains some passages that can, on the contrary, be interpreted as later additions inserted by the author in a previous draft, maybe on the written text. There is a wide debate on the proem, on the variant reading Herodotus of Halicarnassus, or Herodotus of Turi. So both definitions are good for Herodotus, but we can think that Herodotus changed his self-definition in a second edition. But we can also think that an inappropriately zealous grammarian changed either Halicarnassian into Turian or Turian into Halicarnassian. The fact is that Herodotus' text drew the attention of ancient grammarians. We know that even the great, no lesser than Aristarchus, wrote a commentary on Herodotus. And so the Herodotus text was certainly influenced by the activity of grammarians. Benedetto Bravo has recently raised the suspicion that in the 1st century AD, a not very clever scholar completely revised the text by interpolating a lot of passages. The style and the content of this would be additions, would reveal their nature. So it is an idea that has not gained wide consent, but should be addressed seriously. In any case, grammarians surely were surely interested into Herodotus' language, and they revised the text at the level of its linguistic pages. This raises a serious problem, which is not easy to deal with. For we do not exactly know what Herodotus' idiolect sounded like, and according to which orthographic rules, if any, it was fixed in writing. And if we suppose that he dictated his text to different secretaries, of course, orthography could change. But we know from inscriptions that even within the very same text of as brief inscriptions, orthography in 5th century BC could radically change. So it's not easy to imagine how Herodotus or his secretaries wrote his idiolect, and we do not even know what his idiolect was like. Yes, we know many variant versions of Ionic dialect, but did Herodotus follow one specific dialect, or did he use a literary dialect? So the manuscript tradition, including papyri, offers a picture that is not fully consistent. So we see that forms that can be considered as equally legitimate in the Ionian dialect for example, the plural form of accusative polis and polias, are variously attested and may alternate in the same manuscripts. Sometimes you find the clusters of one form, but sometimes variability is more random. And even more problematic is the presence of forms that are not theoretically impossible, but are in a sense ungrammatical within the Ionic. For instance, the aorist infinitives of the type ballet in epsilon, epsilon, iota, ni are ungrammatical, but we know that this form was used by grammarians in Homer, probably in order to preserve the prosody of a different original form. Can we think that Herodotus imitated the written text of Homer by writing so, or were the grammarians who changed the normal balein in balein for it could seem a little more Ionic, but mistakenly, of course. And even non-Ionic forms, like toisde instead of tuiside, the plural dative of the pronoun, so are likely to be a mere tribalizations of the Ionic forms due to copyists. But toisde, which we would say is an active form, can be read in Homer text. So we cannot exclude that Herodotus too employed them. So it is possible in principle that Herodotus may have used a literary dialect influenced by current Homeric texts. And moreover, his own grammatical habits and orthography could have been inconsistent. But on the other hand, it's possible that forms inspired by Homer or wrongly supposed to be more Ionic were introduced by grammarians. So it is not easy to decide in any single case which reading has to be chosen. So our current editions, with the exception of Rosen's, more or less depend on an editorial Vulgata, which was established in the 19th century. And the edition by Manuel Becker was fundamental in the establishment of this Vulgata. It was established in an age when a fuller exploration of manuscripts on the one side and the development of historical linguistics seemed to lead to the definition of a standard Ionic that could be ascribed to Herodotus, but the matter is much more complex. There are some recent articles by Olga Tribulato, which are very interesting from this point of view, and if you are interested in this field, I would suggest to read these articles. And even the papyri, that is ancient books reporting Herodotus text, show that different linguistic variants were already circulating in antiquity. But if we move from the formal constitution of the text to the material constitution of the text, as Romance philologists say, I mean, if we move from the analysis of the language to the variants that have some relevance as to what Herodotus says, not how Herodotus says it, we find that papyri offer, on one hand, a number of readings that are surely better than those attested in our medieval manuscripts. Nor can we discern in the papyri through prefigurations of the main medieval families. In other terms, we cannot say that papyri testify as to the existence of different editions more or less similar or equal to the different families of medieval manuscripts. On the other hand, we see that all medieval manuscripts share a number of common mistakes, but we can single out at least two main families which are characterized by their own mistakes, and these mistakes sometimes depend on the misreading of capital letters. So, this points to an origin of our medieval tradition in a late ancient Vulgata, with some mistakes common to all exemplars, from which two main lines of descent were derived through two different transliterations when Greek texts were transcribed from majuscule to minuscule, from ancial models to minuscule manuscripts. In the Byzantine age, Herodotus was not perhaps as popular as authors whose ethic or artistic language could be imitated, but was actively read in schools and within some circles. And this helps to explain the existence of at least two transliterations, and above all, the presence of different recensions of the text, as well as extensive contamination. So we can say that Herodotus' tradition was contaminated in antiquity and continued to be contaminated in the Middle Ages, in the Byzantine age. Now, contamination is one of these words of the jargon of philologists which bear a lot of ambiguities. Contamination is the contrary of purity. It evocates pollution, miasma. For non-philologists, I must say that contamination is no dirty business. Contamination, in fact, simply means that texts were widely read and were read in schools and were read by scholars who tried to understand them and to explain them. So if they found a mistake, they tried to find a different manuscript in order to compare the variant readings. And so they transferred one reading to the new text. In a school, all the pupils had their own Herodotus, but they made corrections according to what the teacher said. So contamination is simply a way to describe the fact that the texts were widely read and studied. So this means that the most popular authors, the authors who were mostly appreciated, were subject to contamination. That is, to circulation of variant readings. And our modern editions, critical editions, are in fact contaminated texts, for we take variant readings from different witnesses. Of course, a modern critical edition is a critical work. It tries to find elements in order to motivate the choices we make. But also Byzantine scholars were able to do that. Most of all, in critical editions, we try to explain what we're doing, and we do not obliterate the data of the witnesses in order to introduce new readings. We preserve ancient readings. So, a critical editions allows the reader to check the work of the author. Ancient scholars who created contaminated texts do not always make the same. And Herodotus' tradition is, in part at least, and in good part, a contaminated tradition because Herodotus was widely read. In spite of this, we can single out different families, lines of descent of the manuscripts. And scholars agree on the fact that there are two main families of manuscripts, which are usually defined as Stirps Florentina, the family of Florence, and Stirps Romana, the family of Rome. So the most ancient representative of the Stirps Florentina is a manuscript of the 10th century, of the early 10th century, a wonderful manuscript. I can show it. Yes, it is this on the left. Which bears some traces of its descent from ancient exemplars. You see, for instance, at the end of the first page, so I reproduce, there is a number, Kiki et eta, it means 2322. It is the so-called stichometry, the calculation, the compute of the lines in an old roll, for each book corresponding to a roll. At the end of a book, you find the calculation of the lines, which was also used in order to pay the scribe, the copyist, according to the job he had done. Then there are other manuscripts which share some mistakes and some features with this authoritative manuscript. There is especially another manuscript from Rome, from the Bibliotheca Angelica, while the first one I showed you, the Bibliotheca Medici Laurenziana Plute 73, is usually designed with the siglum A. Another manuscript, which is akin to it from Rome, is usually designed with the siglum B. And then there are other manuscripts which are more or less similar to this. It is a problem in a sense, the fact that B is very, very similar to A. It has only a very limited number of variant readings. They are almost twins, in a sense. And this is a family with its own features. Then we have another family, the Stirps Romana, which is characterized by some common innovations. And maybe the most apparent innovation is the absence of some chapters in the first book. We can trace the work of a redactor who abridged and also bowdlerized the text. For among the parts which are left off, there are also some chapters with the sexual content, but not only that. It is an abridged version in the first book. And then this family has a number of differences from the front of the first one. Its most ancient representative is a manuscript which is in the Bibliotheca Apostolica Vaticana, the Vaticanus Graecus 2369. Its usual siglum is D. And this is an ancient manuscript, it's of the 10th century. There is then a group, a wide group of other manuscripts which are close to D, but all appear to descend from a lost common ancestor, which was usually called Beta. Nigel Wilson, in his editions, has renamed this group as R. We can see that this subgroup within the Stirps Romana descends from a manuscript with variant readings. It was a contaminated manuscript. The manuscripts of this group bear the evidence of the work of a Byzantine scholar, or more Byzantine scholars, who collected the varie lectiones. We can make an example which was made already by Carl Lude, and it's very clear. Oh, sorry. visualizing it. Yeah. Can you see the wall of the slide? Do you hear me? Sorry.
Hello, Aldo. Yes, we see it. We can hear you just fine.
Yeah, sorry, I have a part which I cannot see, no problem. So, if you see the apparatus criticus, you see at line 2392, according to Wilson's edition, which I'm using just for it was easier to find the PDF, but I don't think it's the best edition possible, but we'll say something at the end. You see, there are two main variant readings, a Pelasan and the Palesan. And then you find the readings of R, S, V, which are parts of this subgroup, the group of beta or R. And R as Doko and Stalesan, where Doko is clearly a comment of the copyist who wrote, I think I should write a Stalesan. Maybe he couldn't read his model well, or maybe he was trying to make a conjecture in presence of a text which was very confused, for it had many variazioni, many variant readings at the same point. So there are many other examples of this phenomenon in this subgroup. So as we shall see in a moment, there has been a vast, wide debate as to whether this group is a descendant of D, the manuscript of the Ticana, or is derived from a parallel line. And the problem is that it is not easy to give a definite answer, just because this group is contaminated, there's many different readings, and it's not easy to find the elements to demonstrate its descent from D or from a parallel line. So the remaining manuscripts, apart from these two groups, we could say many other things, but I try to be brief. The remaining manuscripts are or the scripti, this means copies of surviving manuscripts, or the result of further contamination between the two main branches. And it's not easy to use the other manuscripts in order to reconstruct a stem. So we know in principle that A on the one side and the D on the other are the purest representatives of the two branches. As for the other manuscripts, it's not easy to evaluate their readings. If we have time and leisure enough, we'll make an appendix. But I would like to explain that this result, the preeminence of A and D as representatives of two branches, which can both preserve a good text of Herodotus, a good paradosis, as philologists say in their jargon, good tradition. This is a result which was attained between the 18th and 19th century, but it was a long process. And I would like to make some examples of the way we arrived to this conclusion. Herodotus Editio Princeps was published by Aldus Manutius in 1502. And as often happened, it was based on recent contaminated manuscripts, which had several particularly copy errors. In 1570 and then in 1592, Henri Etienne or Dicus Stephanus reproduced Aldus' text, but he annotated some variant readings in the margins. for he had seen other manuscripts. But up to the 18th century, Herodotus' printed text was substantially depending on manuscripts of little or no value. Let's make an example. This is an example I usually make in my classes of classical theology, for it has some interest. These are reproductions of some editions, and the passage in question is 927. Herodotus is saying that the Athenians fought with the Amazons when they invaded Attics. But the text printed by Aldus had strange expressions. I don't know whether you can see, but es Amazonidas tas apothecas tas apotermodontos. The Amazons, then this strange word, the tas apothecas, the storehouses or the stores from Thermodon. Stephanus knew that some manuscripts did not have tas apothecas. And Thomas Gale, 1679, said, referring to tas apothecas, ec dele, cancel these words. For he said, one important manuscript has not these words, and the translation of Valla doesn't know this word, and so on. Gale was right, but in spite of his sensible observations, through the first part of the 18th century, there was a wide debate as to interpretation of tas apothecas. Gronovius, who published a very important edition of Herodotus in 1715, tried to correct tas apothecas and proposed tas apothetas, the undesirable Amazons. And then many other scholars spent all their ingenuity in order to correct tas apothecas. Yeah, I reported a page from the edition of Besseling who gives an account of these attempts. And they invented the very, very ingenious conjectures. Tas autecastas, the self-willed Amazons, or the Amazons from Themyscira River Thermodon. Friedrich Ludwig Abresch, which was no stupid scholar, but maybe a little too fantastic, postulated a complicated hyperbaton, some ellipses, the insertion of a word, and tried to say that Herodotus meant, in the stores of our great deeds, we have the action we performed against the Amazons. So Peter Besseling in 1763 put an end to this wasteful display of ingenuity by observing that most of the manuscripts he knew did not have the word tas apothecas, and that this word could not be considered as ancient tradition, but were only the result of a lithography, and they were found only in some secondary and negligible witnesses of the text. In fact, we know this word from a manuscript from Modena. Here you have the passage in question. Wilson, of course, does not print tas apothecas and doesn't say anything in upper and apparatus, and he's right. Rosen, who is always a little more rich in its apparatus, says that Apothecas Tasapo is found in M, which is a manuscript from Modena of the 16th century. But you see, I made this example to show how the fact that the Editio Princeps and then the Vulgata was founded on secondary manuscripts sometimes compelled or stimulated scholars to make very ingenious conjectures which were based on nothing, or the particular mistakes of very late manuscripts. Wesseling had already realized that the true tradition of Herodotus had to be based on the two families. He had a clear idea of these two families. But the point is that in the 18th and in the 19th century, the most ancient representative of the Stirps Romana, the manuscript of the Vaticana, D, was not known. So, on the one side, we had A, the manuscript of Florence, and other very ancient manuscripts for the Stirps Florentina. On the other side, we had the manuscript of the subgroup Beta, or R, as Wilson says, which are clearly contaminated and are more recent, 14th, 15th century. So there was a tendency to say the best tradition is that of the Stirps Romana, Stirps Florentina, sorry, Aena, while the Stirps Romana is not so important. In the 18th century, there was a wide debate on this matter, and debate which would be interesting to reconstruct in detail, but I see that, alas, it's already 9:15 in Italy. In the 18th century, the debate on the tradition and the editions of Herodotus was very intense, but there are many reasons for that. There is, of course, the development of scientific classical philology. But we should not forget that the great success of classical philology in the 18th century was also based on the role that Greek and Latin texts had in education, in the schools, the gymnasia in Germany. Herodotus was read in schools. It was read in the Secunda, which is the penultimate class of the secondary school. And around the middle of the 19th century, a vast market opened up. School needed commented editions of Herodotus. It was also a big business, a great business. And the main publishing houses, the publishing giants, launched a series of commenting texts and recruited teachers in the schools in order to prepare these texts for the schools. So this leads to introducing one of our heroes, with Heinrich Marcus Stein, who was a school teacher, a school professor, we should say, in German gymnasia. At a certain degree of the career, a school teacher could bear the title professor. He was an extraordinary figure. He studied Greek and Latin relatively late, but then he studied in Göttingen and Bonn, and he was in Göttingen in 1848, and he took part in the democratic movement. We also have a letter of his to Karl Marx. He wrote to Karl Marx and proposed himself as a correspondent for the Neue Rheinische Zeitung. and he closed his letter with democratic greetings, Aufrichtigen Demokratik Gruß, and then he signed Studiosus Philosophiae and Rei Publicae, more or less a student of the Faculty of Arts and engaged in politics and democratic. So in the following years, he became closer to the establishment, but he always remained a very independent personality. Then he became a director of gymnasium. So in the 50s, he was charged by one of the greatest public houses of Germany, Weidmann, to publish a commentary to Herodotus. And he entered in competition with others enterprises of the same kind. One of his competitors was Karl Wilhelm Krüger, another very interesting person. For he too was a very independent and democratic man, to the point that he retired from school, for he was always quarreling with the directors and other colleagues. And he lived on the meager incomes of his own publishing house, producing commentaries and grammars. And he also published a very interesting and important commentary to Herodotus. So when other commentaries and that of Stein began to be published, he started a very bitter polemics against his rivals, against his competitors. But the very nemesis, or the real competitor of Stein, was Karl Abicht, who in the same years was preparing a school commentary for Teubner, the other publishing giant of the age. So Abicht and Stein kept quarreling all their life long. And at the beginning, Abicht was an ardent supporter of the prevalence of the Stips Florentina, while Stein defended the value of the Stips Romana. It's interesting to say that Stein was a very honest person. At a certain point, understood that the Stips Florentina had its merits, or it was even better than the Stips Romana. And so, while publishing in different editions, commentary in these editions, I have here a sketch of his work. He progressively said the Stips Florentina is better and is the very basis for the edition of Herodotus. But he kept quarreling with Abicht, for he attacked Abicht in his own field, also in his own field. He said Abicht has not really understood how good is the manuscript of Florence, and he also has reported some readings in an incorrect manner and so on. So I'm giving a summary, but if you read the articles they wrote, it was terrible attacks, also with the personal attacks. So it was a real feud, which ended in a reconciliation, in a sense, of the two rivals. But Stein was in fact the real winner, because he published an edition in 1869 and 1871, which was a masterpiece. And then he kept reviewing and correcting his commentary, you can see, up to 1908, always adding and improving. And Stein's commentary remains a tool that every Herodotus scholar should use. I would say we should always compare the different editions of this commentary, for sometimes there are good ideas in former editions, not in the last. Well, in the 19th century, the preference for Stirpe Florentina was established. A general preference for Stirpe Florentina was established, but this couldn't obscure the fact that the Stirpe Romana also preserves ancient tradition. The problem was that the Stirpe Romana did not have any representative more ancient and better than the subgroup beta. In fact, however, a better witness had survived and had been rediscovered in 1868 by Carlo Dilthey, who was a philologist in Göttingen and the brother of Wilhelm Dilthey, the philosopher, which is maybe more known. He could consult this manuscript in 1878 in the library of the Collegio Romano at Rome, but he could collate only the first book, and this collation had remained unpublished until 1911. And in 1870, this manuscript had disappeared as a consequence of the annexation of Rome to Italy. For the in front of the menace of the confiscations of ecclesiastical properties, many manuscripts were concealed. Now we know that these important manuscripts were Herodotus D, which Dilthey had seen in the Collegio Romano in 1868, was brought to Castel Gandolfo, and only in 1912 it was bought by the Biblioteca Vaticana. In the meantime, Carl Hude published his edition for the Oxford Classical Text. The first edition is 1908, and it was no real improvement on Stein's Editio Maior. In 1912, Hude published a second edition in which he could make an account of the new readings of D, which had in the meantime made known, and also some readings of the papyri. But he did not yet seen D. Only in 1927 he could publish his third edition, where he could give a full account of the variant readings of D. And from that moment, the authority of the Stirpe Romana, more or less like Stirpe Florentina, is a result that we can taken for granted. So we could say many, many other things, but ora ruit. We could just make a hint to the fact that after Hude's edition, Paul Maas examined the tradition and said, well, if D is an authoritative representative of the Stirpe Romana, we can say that Herodotus tradition is more or less like this. We have on one side the Stirpe Florentina, on the other side the Stirpe Romana, divided into two branches, D on one side and the group RSV, beta or R, is like on the other. Mas was trying to say that Herodotus had a pure tradition, which could be analyzed in stemmatic terms. If this stemma is true, we could say, well, whenever the reading of RSV is the same of that of ABCOA, we can accept this reading as the reading of the archetype of the more ancient stage of the tradition, and we can exclude the reading of D for obvious thematic reasons. The fact is that we know RSV is deeply contaminated, and sometimes these manuscripts draw their readings from A. So it can be that D is right against A and RSV. When there is contamination, you have not a closed recension, and you cannot use the stemma as a mechanism in order to choose the readings. So, yeah, you have a sketch of some other proposal of stemmas or stemmata or partial stemmata. Due to the nature of beta, the contaminated nature of beta, it is not easy to make a stemma. And the last attempt by Raffaella Cantore draws an interesting stemma of the stirps romana here. But you see, there are these lines, these not continuous lines, that mean contamination from A to D, from A to B, and so on. This is a realistic picture of the traditions. This means that A on one side and D on the other are important representatives, but we cannot use the other manuscripts in order to choose between A and D. Judicium, the personal judgment of the editor, has to be used in these cases. I'm simplifying maybe too much, but I don't want to be boring. We could say something about Rosen's editions. Rosen was a linguist, and he tried to publish a text of Herodotus according to grammatical rules. I don't want to be too tranchant, but I could say, and many agree with me, that many or most of these rules are simply inventions or harsh reconstructions, which are not easy to share. I imagine you expect some words about the most recent event in Herodotian scholarship. I mean, Nigel Guy Wilson's 2015 edition for the Oxford Classical Text, which is intended to replace Hoode's edition in the same series. Well, I'll say something. As I said before, I don't think that Wilson's edition can be used as a standard text of Herodotus. As any edition, it has some strengths and some weaknesses. Among the strengths are indeed the fact that it could take into account a lot of papyri. And so you find in apparatus many readings that all these editions couldn't know. Then he took from Stein the idea that some passages in Herodotus could be second thoughts, could be additions made by the author himself. And this could explain some difficulties in the syntaxes and so on. This could be a good idea, I don't know, but one should not abuse of this remedium steinianum, as a reviewer has called it. Then, an element which is a feature which is interesting in Wilson's editions is the amount of conjectures that he reports, especially conjectures of modern scholars, of Paul Maas himself, or John Enoch Powell, who did a great work on Herodotus text. Some conjectures of a Swede scholar, Victorino Spingel, which was a very intelligent scholar, and some conjectures of himself. He also accepted some conjectures of mine, and maybe he was wrong in this. But speaking of conjectures, we move to the weaknesses of this new edition. Apart from a little attention to the ancient history of the text, and apart from the fact that he has not re-examined the manuscripts, so sometimes you find some mistakes which are simply taken from the previous editions. Apart from that, yeah, he's tried to improve the number of manuscripts, and especially the representative of the Stips Romana, but as a reviewer said, he didn't succeed in this. In my opinion, he chose the wrong manuscripts. But apart from that, I think that he accepted too many conjectures into the text, and maybe reported too many conjectures in the apparatus. For instance, I saw that Powell is quoted almost 500 times in the Apparatus Criticus. Powell was a genius, apart from what one can think of his ideas in many fields. From philological point of view, was a raisonneur. But this is the point. I will make an example. Just one example, but we can examine many passages in Wilson's edition in order to show that is too open to accepting conjectures when it is far from necessary, in my opinion, to do that. An example that could seem a little strange, but I think it is meaningful. It is a passage from the first book, chapter 53. And here Herodotus is describing some gifts that Croesus made to the sanctuary of Amphiaraus in Thebes. And among this gift is Aicmen steren pasen crusein toxisten telon keon moios cruseon. This is Wilson's text. If you see the apparatus, manuscripts have tesi lonchesi, the plural, and then you find a strange signum. But first of all, let's give a translation of the text. The text says, a spear all of solid gold, the shaft being of gold also, as well as the points, for manuscripts have tesi lonchesi, the plural. Wilson prints telonche and says that he took this conjecture from SY, and then he writes 1824. I'm supposing that Nigel Wilson was posing a puzzle to readers, of course, but it is not impossible to solve it. For this SY is a scholar who wrote an article in the Classical Journal of 1824, which was a a collection of different observations on different authors. I suspect him to be Solomon Young, who was classical tutor at the Stepney Academical Institution in those years, but I'm not sure of that. In any case, if you read the text of SY, or Solomon Young, if you can say so, sorry, he just observed that the use of the plural is a singularity. I know not whether the singularity of expression has been observed. So I'm not sure that the poor SY really intended to correct the text, but that is what Wilson has done. Well, if one reads ancient commentaries, one can find in Kruger's commentary, you remember Carl Wilhelm Kruger, an explanation of the plural. I'm sorry, I'm trying to. Well, Kruger said in his annotation, Kruger said, über die beiden Spitzen der Lanze zu Xenophon. Unfortunately, I cannot read the text Xenophon and the passage of Anabasis. I have a problem in my screen, but I think you read the passage in question. So Kruger said, Herodotus is speaking of more than one point, 2 points, and he said, if you want to understand why, please read Xenophon Anabasis, this passage. And this passage is very interesting, for in that passage, Xenophon says that this people, this Asiatic people, had a spear, very long spear, which had only one point, and use the same term, long. So, the Greek Xenophon noticed that another people has a spear with only one point. This means that for a Greek, a normal Greek spear has more than 1 point. 2 points, of course. And so Kruger was right. A passage like that demonstrates that the plural should not be changed in Herodotus' text. Because for a Greek audience, there is nothing strange in a spear that has more than 1 point. On the contrary, what is strange is a spear with only 1 point. So, I think that in this case, Wilson adopted a conjecture which modifies Herodotus' text without trying to understand the reality that was behind Herodotus' text. I know that it seems normal to think that spears have only 1 point, but it's not always so. Wilson often makes so. He adopts conjectures with, in my opinion, simplify or the text, or change the text where there is no need to change it. It is true that a philologist must have a head and not a pumpkin on their shoulders, and the brains not padding in their head. This is a quotation from Hausmann. But also arguing in defense of a transmitted text that is not prima facie obvious implies having a head on one's shoulders, as well as being open to less plain truths in different linguistic and historical contexts. This is always true, but it's especially true in front of the delusive simplicity of Herodotus. Herodotus sometimes seems simple, but is very often ironical and says more than one can read at first glance. So correcting his text is something that one always does at their own risk. In a sense, the editor of any ancient text, but of Herodotus, especially of Herodotus, is just a traveler who ventures into a foreign land and is called to understand local traditions before judging them. For custom is king of all, or if you prefer, everything is possible in the long course of ages. Among the many things Herodotus teaches us, certainly is a kind of ironical openness to different perspectives and possibilities. I think that philologists who deal with this text should try to take advantage of this lesson. They have to use their reason, of course, and not accept the mistakes of traditions. But before correcting, they must try to understand the reality which is behind the text and the not so simple mentality and mental set of Herodotus. In my opinion, Wilson has not always or has rarely do that. So one can learn a lot from his edition, and it's also useful in order to provocate reactions, in order to posing doubts about the text. But in most of the cases where he corrects, no correction, in my humble opinion, is really needed. That's why I would advise to use a more balanced text like that of Ude as standard text. Of course, I hold Nigel Wilson in high esteem for all his work, and I'm not criticizing him as a scholar. I think that his editions doesn't give the best text of Herodotus, which is available. So I thank you, and I apologize for having talked a little more than I was allowed to do. I'm sorry.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Aldo. You certainly don't need to apologize. I hope you can hear me. That was really fantastic. You took us on a 2,500-year tour of Herodotus's text, and I thank you for that. Could I ask you, Aldo, to stop sharing your PowerPoint?
Yeah, of course.
It would be lovely if we could all see one another.
Yeah.
So thank you. I know lots of people will have been sharing their applause and clapping virtually and otherwise, which you won't have seen, but you'll see now. So thank you, everybody. We don't have very long for questions, but I know there will be lots of questions that people wanted to raise. There were lots of threads here. There was actually a lot of prosopography throughout that talk, which I enjoyed enormously. The details about Stein, who sounds fascinating. I think you used the word extraordinary indeed. Writing to Karl Marx. I loved those kind of details. So thank you for sharing them with us. I learned a great deal, but I don't want to hog the limelight. We only have 15 minutes or so. So please, are there questions that people wanted to raise with Aldo?
May I only ask to speak slowly for...
Yes, of course. Sorry.
I had no problem with your...
Okay, but it's a very good point. So absolutely. Rosaria, hello.
Hello, nice to meet you, Professor Corcella.
Hi,
for the first time I see your face, but I know you work very well. It has been very influential for me. I have a question about these contaminations, these variations among family, the Florentina, the Romana, some of them have more consequence, are more serious, so to speak, from the point of view of our interpreting the thought of Herodotus. Would you agree with that?
So you mean that there are passages where we are not sure as what exactly Herodotus said, or
right? I mean, if you take one version, he's saying one thing. If you take another version, he's saying another thing. So I was just wondering whether you had an example of especially problematic type of variation from that point of view, because I assume the orthographical variations, or sometimes even variation in syntax, it doesn't make much difference from the point of view of understanding the text.
So, of course, I'm not prepared to give you an example. There are many examples where interpretation can be different, and my more diplomatic answer would be to ask every one of us to find a case like that. In my experience, yes, there are some passages so where interpretation can be connected also to the kind of text you chose. So for my part, I was especially interested in the last 3 books, of which I made an edition some time ago. There is a passage where the interpretation, for instance, of the famous dream of Xerxes and the substitution of that Xerxes proposes to Artabanus can be really different according to A and D, according to Florentina and Romana. Now I'm trying to find the passage. I would say book 7, of course. If I remember well, we are in
I think 16 to 18, maybe book 7.
Yeah. Just a minute. So the difference is one of these slight differences due to polygraphical mistake. Siu, you, or u, not. But the sense completely changes according to the variant you choose. Yes, of course, I'm not able to find it at the moment, but if you want, I can send you.
Oh, actually, thank you very much. I will completely reread the whole dream section, and it's going to be a challenge for me to find it. It's thank you. That's
no, there are many other cases, of course, but this one is the first I was able to recollect.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rosaria, for raising that question. And I think it does tie in really nicely with some of the things that Aldo, you were saying during that talk. Again, something I really appreciated, I'm sure others did, about some of the social contexts for reading Herodotus. That's something you kept on coming back to. I really appreciated that when you were telling us about, big business publishing texts. Imagine in our own age that. But there was a time where it was, and there were lots of schoolboy, school readers of these works. So it gave you a real sense of, at certain points in time, the kind of readership that Herodotus had, and in relation to, the dreaded contamination, I guess. Something I really appreciated. Were there other threads or questions that people wanted to ask here? Franco.
If you add this, no, please.
Well, thank you very much, first of all. Can I bring you back towards the beginning of your talk when you were talking about graphene? And then you also talked about the use of the epistolary imperfect. What is your understanding of the use of the most obvious epistolary verb in a non-epistolary way, i.e. in the present, which is where it seems to locate the perspective as that of the writer as opposed to that of the reader?
It's, of course, a good question. And so one could say that Herodotus is describing himself writing in the present, but what he writes is in the past, which is, could be a possible answer. You know, some years ago, I wrote a small paper on Hecateu's poem, or what we have of Hecateu's, where we have this strange formula that you all know, where we found the voice of Hecateu, which is announced by someone who seems to be reading the text of Hecateu, and then Hecateu says grapho. So, of course, we cannot expect a fully consistent usage of the verbs in different passages. But it is interesting to see that both Hecateu's and Herodotus want to represent, the verb maybe is the best one possible, the act of writing, even if they know that this will be read
from that
in time and space.
Would you be happy to take the preface? Would you be happy to take the ede in the preface by analogy as the equivalent, as it were, of the hode muthetai, as it were? That is to
Hede is in a similar way, or can be in a similar way, the formula which announces the epiphany of the text, in a sense. Here you have the text. Here's Herodotus speaking, in a sense.
That's right.
Or here is Hecateu speaking.
And everything is framed by that.
Yeah.
I think in the chat, Elizabeth has referred back to the earlier discussion between Aldo and Rosaria. So Elizabeth, you've looked in Hude's edition and found the variant for Yeld. Is this the one you had in mind, Aldo, the passage?
So in the chat,
they're in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah, Sede and Dude. That's right. 16 gamma. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there's a says more or less, if the ghost or the dream no, here is Artabanus who is speaking. Yeah, Artabanus says, if the dream will not come and visit me, even if I wear your vest. And then it says sede e ipotesi. Sede is the version of the sixth sonata. But on the contrary, we will visit you, Xerxes. The version of the Florentina is if the dream will not visit me and udei and will not appear at all, in a sense. So commentators have heavily tried to interpret in different ways, try to interpret this sentence in order to understand whether there is a conception of the dream that can visit only the king or not. Yes, in both cases this is true, but sede seems to be better, for it implies that the dream is not deceived by the trick that Xerxes proposed, and so gives a different picture of the role of the dream, which is able to single out the king. Yes, of course, even ude may have a sense like that, but sede seems better. Or so many. Maybe this is not the best example. It's only the first one that I recollected.
Yes, but I think we do get the point quite nicely. So thank you to Elizabeth for hunting that down for us as well. We're nearly at the 8:30 point. I'm very conscious of that. I don't want to take up too much of Aldo's time or indeed everybody else here. But I guess that means we've probably got time for one more question. So now is the moment. If you did have something lined up, please do come in and ask. Tom?
Well, only if no one else has a more searching question. Going back to the beginning as well, I was interested in the question that Franco asked, but also I think you said that the theme of public lectures was one that needed a fresh reading in a tantalizing way. You didn't say any more, which is entirely fair. But I just was wanting to know if you could give a hint of where you think that should go, if you like.
Oh, so in fact, I don't know whether I can say what I really think. This was a provocation to my dear old friend Franco, who's working on this theme.
Telling him to finish.
30 years, I think, or 40 years. So,
okay,
but I was sincere. I was sincere.
Thank you, not.
I think that Franco knows a lot about that. That's why I would never dare writing only one line of that theme, because I'm expecting Franco to illuminate all of us.
Okay, I support that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So I'm not sure if Franco will join me here, but can we say mille grazie to Aldo for this tremendous talk? Thank you so much. What a splendid way to start our new series. We're really grateful, and we hope we can entice you back as well. Not least that we will have several sessions this term where we're going to have group discussion. I think that's the case for next week, isn't it, Tom?
That's right. Next week is we try something different. I'll be sending various little excerpts from Powell's lexicon to all of you. But the idea is we're talking about colour in the text, or possibly the lack of colour. I remember years ago being told by a documentary maker that she never wanted to film in Egypt because everything was beige, and there was no other colour available. And the absence of colour seems quite striking. But anyway, I'll be sending references to colour terminology to you, and it's your challenge to find others and to think of ways into this topic. So that's the theme for next week. and I'll send that to you soon. But thank you, everybody. And thank you, especially Aldo.
Indeed. Principally, thank you so much, Aldo. And thank you, everybody. Good to see you. Have a good week. See you next Wednesday.
You.
Bye, and bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tom, I can
Yes.
give you a call sometime if you've got
It'd be lovely.
a
It'd be
free.
lovely.
When would suit you?
Probably an
You're probably
evening at some
busier than
point,
I
but
am.
we can text each other and then find a
Okay.
time. That would be lovely.
Cool.
You look very well. All this mountaineering.
Yeah, I'm alive. I'm just
Okay.